Join our messy healing journey, mixing faith, mental truth, medicine, and caregiving adventures.
All right, here we go.
Here we go.
Episode 1. Welcome to Real Healing with Matt and Angelica, where faith, medicine, and mental health meet.
Nailed it. That's the tagline. This is the Healing Project. We have started these conversations, and we'll start with introductions first and then kind of get into, I guess, why we started this.
Correct.
So do you want to go first? I go first.
I'll go first. I'm Angelica. I'm a nurse, caregiver, mom, abuela, many hats, and going through healing currently.
Yeah. And my name is Matt. I am father, husband. I'm G-Dog to the Grands. We have a mixed blended family, and so we're grateful for that part of our life, and that's kind of who we are. And then professionally, I guess we can go into what that is and how that ties into what we're doing and why we're having this conversation in the first place.
Right. So really we're making this space so that, if you're going through the hard stuff, if you feel like you're alone, it's a place where we can all come together and have a conversation about real struggles and real hard things.
Right. From my perspective and my background, straight out of high school, I went into seminary, Bible college, within the religious organization that I was a part of from a child, and actually worked in that field for a long time. At the same time, while I was pursuing my religious studies and actually interned at my home church I grew up in, I was actually working, normal jobs, being a youth pastor, and then working, throughout the week, 40, 50, 60 hours sometimes, just to kind of balance that. And so the goal was eventually to be involved in some type of full-time ministry. I wanted to pastor, kind of was on my heart to take care of people in a spiritual aspect. So long story, kind of shortened, eventually worked towards that goal, and I pastored a church in Louisiana for a lot of years. And in that time, went to school, went back to school, had some struggles with having to not have accreditation from the Bible college portion, and then going back and actually starting over in late 30s and 40s, going back to school. And the goal there was always to become a licensed counselor. Of that pastoral part of working with people and helping them in their journey was always something I really enjoyed and really loved to do. So that tied into what I was doing, and then experienced some life change, things that happened unexpectedly, went through kind of a season where I experienced a lot of turmoil and
loss.
Yeah, and loss, both professionally, spiritually, a relationship. And so walked through a lot of different seasons. So right now, where I find myself, I'm in grad school to be a licensed therapist. And because of the background that I had, I worked a lot with recovery programs and also end-of-life pastoral care for some of the local networks that were with funeral home networks that were in the area. So I did a lot of that work. So because of that, going back to school, I was recruited, and I work in an operations job, very high demand operations job, a lot of hours, work overnight. So we're in the space right now, and that's kind of where I am professionally. And then I think we'll talk about kind of how that ties into what we're doing.
Absolutely. So for me, you mentioned past life, right? So I worked professionally for a really long time, and then moved out of state and realized that, Louisiana, you can have a job just by experience. In the rest of the world, you have to have a degree, right? So went to nursing school, fell into wound care by accident, really. Met a doctor and just kind of ended up in the wound care world and realized how much I loved it, right? Wound care, it's totally different than any other kind of nursing.
Right.
You physically see someone heal, right? Everything else is a test or a symptom or, kind of thing. And that's not what it is with wound care. You spend a lot of time with your patients, so you get to know them very personally, and their families and all the things. So I really have a passion for helping people heal. And I realized in my nursing career that it's not just skin level, right? A lot of it for the caregivers that are taking care of these people, for all the things, the patients, like the anxiety and the depression and the just overwhelming of having something like a wound is it's a lot. So that is kind of my passion when it comes to why, we started this. We kind of started the page. I started the page to begin with, and it was just for wound care.
Right.
And that kind of led to other conversations, people that are nurses that were having burnout. And it's a real thing.
Right.
We've experienced burnout in a real way.
Well, and your story, you also experienced going through, a loss of child, also marriage, a divorce, experiencing all those things that we have walked through, and that
it would have been great going through all of that and having some resource that said, hey, it's okay to not be okay. And I feel like that's one thing that, there are millions of pages.
Sure.
Right? Millions and millions of pages.
So why are we doing this? Why are we doing this?
So for me, one, we both have a passion for people.
Right.
Right? We love to love on people, and it fills our cup.
Yeah.
So that's number one, right? Number two, I think it is to have a collective space where it's not just one niche, one little thing. It's a place where it is mental health and burnout and grief and caregiving and wound care and all the things.
We talked about the two things in your world. Wound care is where this all started.
Right.
Being able to teach and use that platform to help other people.
Right.
And we quickly realized that the principles of wound care are also crossover, applying to our emotional life and emotional wounds, physical that you cover really, really well, mental, and also spiritual.
Right.
And so I had been talking about a project, and then it just naturally gave way to us like launching this together and putting this out there so that people felt like there's a space where we can be truthful, because the reality is we only scale our healing to the level of our honesty. I'm reading right now a book, and it's really talking about being very transparent, radical acceptance. And the way I process that, it's a great book, but the way I process it is radical truth, and telling the truth to ourselves. Because therapy and these therapeutic works are only as good as we are honest. Just like wound care, if I have a massive wound and I'm only showing you 10% of it and allowing you to deal with 10% of it, I kept 90% of it covered, or you didn't have access, no matter how skilled you are, and you're an amazing nurse, and you're also in school. So we have two daughters in school. I'm in school. You're in school.
Yes.
And we're working full time at the same time.
Yes.
So
we're doing this.
Yeah, we're doing it. So we're experiencing all these healing journeys, and also the pressures of that life. So that principle of wound care, and not exposing all of it and allowing all of it to be worked on is real. And we don't think that we're the answer.
No.
We just want to give people a safe space to be honest, and that it's a
conversation.
A real conversation.
Real conversation. Because we've gone through, I feel like we were in the real estate world, right? And in the real estate world, it has a lot of self-help production, like how do you become better, right? But I feel like that was kind of separate into that world. Like I hadn't experienced a lot of those things, like taking your personality test and what kind of person are you, what feeds you, what hurts you, what are your fears, right? That kind of thing. The books and the conversation, it started peeling back the layers. And I think that that gave me, it kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things that I had not dealt with from my childhood and from growing up and from becoming a teenage mom
Right.
and all the things. And then on top of that, you put, like right now, I'm reading that book, Eat, Pray, Love.
Right.
And one of the things in the 10th edition she says is that stress actually comes from the Latin word compress.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, like I had to read that sentence again because how much stress do we put on ourselves?
Right.
That is what pushes us into the anxieties and the burnout and all the things. And we don't allow ourselves to feel, to be honest, to communicate, and to ask for help.
Right. And we don't, there's a couple of things in that we don't think, again, that we're the answer, but maybe we can help someone. We don't think we're the multivitamin because there's so much content out there, and it's nothing wrong with consuming content in small increments. There is there is plenty of evidence that mass amount is too much, and it's like fast food, right?
Right.
It's good. Everybody likes a good greasy burger, right? There's nothing wrong with that from time to time. But if you're not consuming something healthy, and again, we're not saying that we have all the answers, but we're in the path and process. So maybe we can be the reminder for people to take the multivitamin, right? Maybe we can be the reminder to say it's okay to be where you're at right now and to be honest and truthful so that healing is possible, right? And so that healing, we want you to link with different sources. We want you to link with your local therapist and community groups and support groups.
Absolutely.
Help get around healthy people on your job, in your family. And one thing we want to avoid is blame. We're going to talk about hard things in these long form conversations, and it's not looking to place blame, or even in our stories that we share, we don't want to get into details that would be embarrassing. And at the same time, we want to give enough space so that people can relate and feel like it's okay to be honest and say, I'm hurt or I'm confused. You know, the 5 stages of grief, that's real.
It is.
And we just talked about that part.
We did.
But we want people to be able to be safe in being able to have those conversations. And again, we want to protect and be as healing and wholesome as possible, but just give people a safe space.
Well, I think remembering that healing isn't linear. This isn't a checklist. You're not going to check the box. Oh, I ran today. I drank enough water today. I spent 10 minutes meditating today. I did, you know, like the, what is it called? The miracle morning, right? People confess and profess by the miracle morning. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with having set time to learn and to pray and meditate, and it is very powerful. But in the same regard, it's still a checklist. It's a checklist. Did I check all the boxes? For us, it's remembering that healing is not linear. It's messy. It's honest conversation. It's spiritual, and sometimes it can be funny, right? Sometimes it can be like you have the oh, why did I do that?
Again, too, social media leads us to believe that everybody's nailing it 1,000% every single day.
Yes.
And, you know, they're waking up and doing the most amazing morning routine.
Right. They wake up with a full face of makeup. Beautiful.
Yeah. Knocked out of the park. In reality, you know, a successful week. Take running. Running has been a therapeutic tool. I'm not a good runner. You introduced me to running, and I'm just not a good runner. I'm kind of like a giraffe on roller skates. It's not pretty, but I have found it to be a therapeutic tool for me. So I have an idealized version of what running looks like for me, right? And that it all connects. It's spiritual for me because it makes me come to
turns off the noise.
Yes, it causes enough of a painful process that eventually there's nothing else but you, the pavement, and God, right? So that's spiritual, but it's also physical. It's absolutely mental, clear as day. It's therapeutic for me because I get into a rhythm, breathing, and it's almost like I'm having a meditative session.
Right, and running works for you. Someone else, it may be.
That's right.
Right. Yoga, it may be.
So let's talk about what the perfect week. I want to, you know, every day I want to run at least 1 mile. Right. And that's nailing. That's social media, right? Every day I'm running, you know, 2 miles, whatever, 3 miles. But the reality is that some weeks it doesn't facilitate that perfect goal. So if I get 3 runs minimum, so right, so I have this variation, and yes, the everyday nailing it is ideal, and
Right.
what I want to, that's what I want to aspire to. That's my goal. And that's the idea of the checklist.
Right.
But in reality, if I get it in 3 times a week,
Mm-hmm.
that's better than 0,
Right.
right?
It's
So,
having balance.
right. And
Right.
working through these issues,
I
because
mean, our lives are busy and we have a lot of responsibilities and a lot
right,
of people who depend on us and a lot of with work. I mean, you're in operations, you have, I don't even know how many employees, hundreds, a lot, right? That you're in charge of when you're there.
right,
And all of that. I have patients that I see all day. So at work, we pour. And then when we come home to family, we're still pouring,
right,
right? We're still pouring into our children and grandchildren and our life. And it's finding space. It's finding space, and it's okay
right,
to have space for healing and for self
right,
and not feeling shameful about it.
right. And we're working through all that for sure. And we want to invite people to have a community, or maybe something we say just triggers a thought or inspiration, or there's just a divine move on them to move just a little bit closer
Yeah.
to healing, a little bit closer to the process of becoming.
Mm-hmm. So, what to expect? We're going to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
So, we are going to have different topics. So, physical healing, of course, wound care, nursing,
Right.
and caregiving, right? For the caregivers. I really have a heart for caregivers. When my son was sick for 30 days on hospice, I was his full time caregiver. And that it's a whole different level of giving when you're a full-time caregiver with someone one-on-one 24/7. So we're going to talk about that, and then emotional and mental health, the grief, boundaries, burnout, those kind of things, anxiety, panic attacks. We have daughters that have some real experience that we've walked it, right, with the anxiety and panic attacks, and then faith and spiritual real life, right? Like we often, when we go to church, right? But a lot of times it's just going to the great divine. We'll go out into nature and just have really quiet time and appreciate the beauty and the wonder that God has made, and spend time reflecting, out in nature on a trail or on a beach or
Right.
whatever. So we're going to talk about that and a little bit of the church hurt, right? That
Sure, it comes along
real.
along with life experience. No one gets out of life unscathed.
It's very true.
Whether those are, you created some of that,
Mhm.
or it was just created before you even came into existence.
Right.
Those patterns that we experience very early on, the early onset dramatic and traumatic events that happen, that kind of give us these patterns that if we're not aware and start working on them, we just keep repeating them over and over. So we want to talk about that, give space for that.
Absolutely. So some of the episodes would be just us. Some of the episodes will be one of us and not both of us. And some of them we've talked about, and we're not really sure yet how that's going to look, but maybe therapists, pastors, other nurses, other caregivers, and getting their real stories and how where they are in their healing journey, what has worked for them and what has helped. So you can expect to see maybe other people with us.
And the format, we're not really sure. We really think that smaller sessions, we don't want to just talk endlessly about like our preferences in movies and hey, we can do that all day long, or music or whatever that is. Yeah. It's not necessarily long form. We want it to be informational and inspirational, that you can take something and apply it to your toolkit. That's all we are hoping for.
Absolutely. So we want to invite you to subscribe, share, leave a comment, tell us where you are in your healing journey. And we're like we said, we're trying to build a community of safe space for real talk and real healing.
And it's not going to be pretty. Like, we're starting off that we're just doing it. We're leaning in. We have a single camera today, and who knows, a couple months from now,
Right.
It may
And
you may see changes and upgrades.
things may get a little better. Who knows? But our next episode, so this is just kind of our introduction, saying hi, what we're here, why we're here, and what we're doing. And then our next episode, we had a real response to the grief stuff, the talks and the information that we put out this last week on social media. So our next kind of long form episode is going to be about grief. We're going to talk about that, and we'll share a little more about our personal stories. I've been kind of collecting phrases and things from different books that just are, I mean, they make my heart skip, you know. So we're going to talk about grief and not just death, right? Because grief happens in many ways. You know, it can be a loss of a job, a relationship, you know, all the quiet things we don't talk about. So we're going to talk about that in our next long form. So we just want to say that healing starts with honesty and with a real conversation.
Absolutely. So thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe, and join our community.
Yes. Done. Are you happy with it? You don't know.
I don't know.
Me neither. All right. It is risky.